On today's show, who is going to win the Frozen Four? We preview that and a lot more on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we bring down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalakash, joined by Sebastian High, and on today's show, we'll be previewing the Frozen Four in the NCAA. The four members of the Frozen Four have already been decided. We already know which teams it's going to be, so we're going to be doing our brackets, choosing our 3 stars, and also previewing each of the first matchups and telling you which players you should look out for in this tournament. Before we get into any of today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Takes a moment of your time, helps the channel out a lot. Leave us a comment letting us know what you think of the episode, who you think is going to win the honors this year. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, leave us a rate and review. That also helps out the channel. And make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started right away here with the first matchup of the 2 games of the Frozen Four that's going to be going on April 11th. It's going to be BU versus Denver. We can start off with those 2 teams. Let's start by previewing the players to look out for. We can start off with Boston University because there is a massive list of players we can look out for on their side, right?
There certainly is, including some pretty high-profile names, including the, likely first overall pick in the 2024 NHL draft class, Macklin Celebrini, incredibly pacey, skilled, and intelligent two-way center who is probably the best rush attacker already in the entire NCAA as the league's youngest player. He's pretty good at hockey. And apart from him, we've got Lane Hutson, who I think everyone that's listening to this episode is already fairly familiar with at this stage. We talk about him a lot, dynamic offensive defenseman, but the list goes on, right? I mean, ranging from Tom Willander to Ryan Green, there's a lot of talent in this lineup and a lot of depth too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on defense is really the kind of standout for me with BU. And although I really like what Denver brings to the game defense wise, I think that BU has the superior defense core. I mean, you mentioned Lane Hutson already. He's a game breaker on the offensive end of the ice, but he's also really improved his defensive game. He's gotten better at choosing the right times and the right timing to pitch and to pinch and make his plays defensively, whether that's pinching up to the offensive zone blue line, kind of surfing the defense off the rush, kind of closing in on players, that kind of thing. He was a 62nd overall pick of the 2022 NHL draft of the Montreal Canadiens, and that's already looking like a massive steal. But outside of that, I mean, Tom Willander, the recent 11th overall pick of the Vancouver Canucks, a right-handed defenseman. He's playing in his freshman year. He hasn't been too bad, but he's definitely in Lane Hudson's shadow. They've played on a pair together at times, and oftentimes this year they've also been separated. So right now, I believe the top pair for Boston is Lane Hutson and Case McCarthy, who is one of the older players on Boston University. He's a right-handed defenseman who's been looking really good, a lot more solid, a lot more reliable defensively, a lot more physical than Hutson. So it kind of they balance each other out. Outside of that, we also have Cade Weber, who was recently traded to Toronto. He's a massive 6'6", 23-year-old defenseman, very defensively reliable. It's not going to give you anything offensively, but a 6'6", 23-year-old defenseman is going to excel in the NCAA. That's just inevitable. But on offense, there are some interesting options as well, right? We talked a bit about Ryan Green and putting him on this list of players to watch for this tournament before he started off. What do you think about Green, and what other fours do you see on BU's roster that you like?
Yeah, so Ryan Green is a 20-year-old centerman. He is a prospect of the Chicago Blackhawks. I believe he was a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick back in 2022. And he is a really intelligent player who likes to get to the gritty areas of the ice and is quite reliable in adding some like middle six scoring to that Boston University team. But beyond that, you have a lot of players that have been drafted in fairly high rounds, ranging from from Dylan Peterson, who is a reliable bottom six centerman, St. Louis Blues, a third-round draft pick from 3 years ago. Devin Kaplan is a toolsy middle six forward whose production is it to fully pop off in the NCAA, but he's a Philadelphia Flyers prospect, and when he gets going, he's one of the more fun power forwards in this lineup. But even then, you have the other Jack Hughes, Kent Hughes' son, who is a LA Kings prospect. He's a reliable defensive center. Specifically, the offensive game has quite stagnated at the NCAA level, but he's going to bring some really solid defensive minutes. And this is going to be, as a whole, a Boston University team that will be looking to shut down Denver offensively, because they have, like, top to bottom, a lineup that can really defend very, very intelligently in a very structured form. They have a very compact defensive structure that, unless you're Boston College, it's very difficult to break through on a consistent basis. But yeah, very fun lineup. I mean, you can have like Luke Tuck, who is a banger of a second line forward, very gritty, gets the dirty areas, loves to lay the body. But yeah, it's a pretty balanced lineup as a whole, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we haven't even mentioned Shane LaChance, who's an Edmonton Oilers draft pick, Jack Harvey,
Yeah.
who's a Tampa Bay Lightning draft pick, I believe. Both
Yes.
late rounders, and looking really, really good so far. But moving on to Denver, because they deserve some love as well. We can start off with the defense, because I think that's where they really, really stand out. I've loved the Buium brothers so far. Shai Buium, who's a Detroit Red Wings pick, has been looking fairly good. But Zeev Buium has taken this defense core by storm. He's a 2024 NHL draft eligible. He's a freshman for Denver, and he's forced himself onto the top pair, top power play, you name it. He's been playing some really solid minutes for Denver, and yeah, just ridiculous numbers so far in the NCAA, right?
I mean, yeah, absurd. Like the production's been absolutely wild. He's such a dynamic playmaker from the blue line, and he's so wriggly. Like, he gets out of pressure so consistently, and yeah, just extremely fun. The fun factor with him is probably the second highest in this matchup after, well, maybe third, after Lane Hutson and Macklin Celebrini. Like, those two are pretty tough to beat. But apart from that, Zeev Buium is going to be really electric in this game. But even beyond that, you have like a high-end playmaking defenseman in Sean Behrens, who can really bring a ton of offense from that second pairing. And
Yeah.
like beyond that too, you have some solid pieces on that blue line, ranging from Kent Anderson, who's a solid defensive defenseman that I've quite liked for the last couple of seasons. Hasn't been drafted yet, but at the very least, at the NCAA level, he's quite reliable. But in the forward core, you have some really interesting names too. I mean, perhaps not as big of names as Boston University has to flaunt here, but Jack Devine has just been ridiculous this season. He's put up like 27 goals and 55-ish points in like 40-something games this season, and has really been carrying the load of offense for well, the forward core at the very least. Zeev Buium has been carrying quite a bit of it as well from the blue line, but it's a very, like, it's more of a ragtag bunch of forwards in terms of the caliber in this Frozen Four, when you compare
Yeah.
it to not only Boston University, but also Michigan and Boston College. You have a ton of first-round draft picks just littering the forward cores of those lineups. And you have some more like interesting, like maybe like bottom six NHL projected players here who are very good in the NCAA. Like Riga Lorenz comes to mind, whose
Yeah.
production hasn't necessarily been elite this season, but is another high intensity, high motor, physical presence from the wing. And yeah, like this has been a real team over the course of this season. Whenever I've watched Denver, I've seen a really cohesive unit that has all bought into a very specific system, and has been leaning on a couple very specific players to produce high-end flair and dynamic creation offensively.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is going to be a fantastic matchup. I think these two teams are really going to go at it, and both of them are kind of built similarly in terms of having like one or two really like bona fide star forwards. One star defenseman who's producing really well, an undersized, mobile, offensively gifted, offensively creative star defenseman. Basically the same on that end. I just think that BU has so much depth; it's going to be difficult for Denver to get past that. But Denver could, with the right goalie performances at the right times, with timely saves at the right moments, you never know. It's tighter of a matchup than it looks, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. But that wraps things up for our first segment. We'll get into our second, where we discuss the other matchup in this Frozen Four. We'll look at Michigan versus Boston College after these messages from our sponsors at FanDuel.
The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on the action. Because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 that you can use on any tourney, whether it be the NHL, and I mean, the playoffs are going to start in not all that long. We're only 2 weeks away, or maybe even the NCAA action, as we are talking about in this episode. The choice is yours with FanDuel. And I know I'm always a very big fan of like single game parlay, specifically to make the action even more exciting, especially when you're attending an event live. You can pick a couple different bets to put your stakes on, and just make the action even more exciting than it already is. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Alrighty, moving on to the second of the Frozen Four matchups. We're going to be talking about Michigan versus Boston College. Who's going to win that? Which players you should be looking out for, and why this game is so interesting. We'll start off with Michigan because there's a lot to love here. I mean, we could start off with Frank Nazar, who's been absolutely ridiculous. And leading into this, I mean, the pass he made to Gavin Brindley on that insurance goal against
Yeah.
Michigan State was a thing of beauty. Just walked into the offensive zone, timed his run really well in order to get a puck inside a motion and not put himself offside, and then went between the legs, cross ice to Gavin Brindley. And it wasn't just a flashy play. He was looking to make that pass on the backhand, but the defenseman was doing a really good job of blocking that pass. So it went between the legs, lifted it through the lane, cross ice to Gavin Brindley, who just
On
sniped
the
it in.
tape.
Yeah, so we'll talk about those two because the chemistry they've been building has been fantastic, and it's been leading to great results on Gavin Brindley's side, especially. And Nazar, after a year that he missed last year with some, surgery, some difficult injuries, that kind of stuff, has really bounced back for Michigan, hasn't he?
He really has. And like, this is the player that the two of us ranked second overall in that 2022 draft, which
Yep.
in a redraft would probably no longer stay quite the same. But the dynamic offensive ability, the raw skill, and just the bullish desire to find creative solutions to any situation he finds himself in is really admirable, and is really what gives him such like astronomical upside still now. Like there is a negligible chance that he ends up as a first liner for the
Yep.
Chicago Blackhawks. And as you mentioned, the chemistry between him and Gavin Brindley has been excellent this season. These are two players that play the game in somewhat similar styles, with different approaches. Certainly, like Brindley has an even higher motor than Frank Nazar, which is saying something. But these
Yeah.
are probably two of the couple fastest players in the entire NCAA. They are constantly like trying to up the pace, and their ability to like really execute on high end plays at their top speeds has made them an incredibly dynamic duo for the University of Michigan this season. And
Yeah.
on top of those two really high end prospects, you have a player like Rutger McGroarty, who has been playing some excellent, highly intelligent hockey this season. He's a real goal scoring threat. He was a first round draft pick for the Winnipeg Jets in
Mhm.
2022. And yeah, like in terms of a triple threat, that is one of the better ones among forwards in the entire NCAA.
For sure, and then you add the Duke brothers to that, Dylan and Tyler. Dylan Duke is the older of the two. He was a Tampa Bay Lightning draft pick. He's been looking really, really good. I had some big questions about his game. His skating was a major issue in his draft year and made him slip all the way to the fifth round, I believe,
Yeah.
to Tampa Bay. And credit to the Lightning, they took a swing on a player who had a bona fide weakness, and we know how good the Tampa Bay Lightning's development staff is, especially when it comes to developing skating. They work in depth with Barb Underhill, who's probably the best skating coach
Yeah.
in the world. And yeah, she's clearly helped out because Duke isn't slow anymore. He doesn't play heavy anymore. He's really kind of quick on his feet. He's able to get out of scenarios where he's got to kind of corral a puck in tight and move through a check. No problem doing that. He gets off the boards well. Even though the skating isn't perfect, it's at least gotten to a point where it's usable, right? So
Yeah.
that's been a great progress in Dylan Duke's game. And Tyler Duke is one of both of our favorites in terms of prospects that are kind of going under the radar. I believe he's still not drafted, right?
He's still not drafted.
Yeah, exactly. And he's been looking really good. He transferred over from Ohio State University. He's an undersized left-handed defenseman who plays a really reliable, defensively solid style that really fits well with his skills. He's not a player that tries to outdo himself in terms of what he's capable of doing. He's very aware of what he can do. What he can do really well is defend the rush, defend in zone, put a stick in the right lanes. Just an incredibly smart defenseman. But again, undersized defensemen who don't produce all that much usually don't get picked up. So it's not that much of a surprise, right?
It's not, but I mean, after this season, playing with a program as strong as the University of Michigan, and also being an assistant captain right out of the gate following his transfer, like he's an assistant captain while his older brother isn't, and he's been
Yeah.
with the program for quite a while now. So he's a real leader, both on and off the ice, and he's just a player that I have adored watching. He's on the same NTDP team as Lane Hutson, and
Yeah.
those are two of my favorites in that program that season.
For sure. And now we get to Boston College. And I mean, take your pick, right? I mean,
Oh my
there's so
God, where
many
do we
players who
start?
can. Yeah. I mean, I'll say we'll start at forward because there is a long and extensive list of players we can look at. We can look at the line that has been together since their NTDP days: Gabe Perreault, Will Smith, Ryan Leonard. What a combination of skills. Ryan Leonard has taken leaps and strides this year, especially has really showcased his high-end motor, his constant engagement, the energy he brings to the game, but especially the goal scoring and skill. I remember this one play he made where he went between the legs and then swung it across to Will Smith for a goal. And Will Smith is no slouch either. I mean, he scored 4 goals in this recent in the Hockey East finals against Boston University. And yeah, scoring 4 goals against BU as a freshman, you're a good player. So yeah, Will Smith was the 4th overall pick of the San Jose Sharks. Ryan Leonard was a 9th overall pick of the Washington Capitals, and Gabe Perreault was a pick in the 20s of the New York Rangers, all in the 2023 NHL draft. So all 3 are freshmen, all 3 graduated together. But that's not all. I mean, Cutter Gauthier has been fantastic this year for them. We know with all the drama that's going on, there's a lot of questions going on around Cutter Gauthier and why he was traded. He's a good hockey player. He's a great goal scoring forward. A pure sniper whose off puck movement has come a long way since his draft year. He's improved in leaps and bounds. And yeah, he's looking like one of the better non current NHL prospects. He's looking really, really good. Outside of that, there's a lot of depth to their roster, but those are the kind of the main standouts, the big stars. And we haven't seen this glut of stars like this on one team in a while, right?
It's been a while for sure. I mean, like the
Yeah.
University of Michigan has been hoarding talent for a little while, so there've definitely been iterations of that University of Michigan team over the past like 4 or 5 years that I think could get close to this. But as
Yeah.
you mentioned, like this in terms of just a raw accumulation of incredible skill, this is one of the better like lineups that we've seen in the past decade in
Yeah.
NCAA hockey, and it's going to be very fun to watch this team in that Frozen Four because it's not just the forward core either. They have a really solid defensive core that is perhaps devoid of a true star on the blue line, but is constructed top to bottom with intelligent players who fit very specific roles in that team, whether it be, I mean, Captain Eamon Powell, who is a Tampa Bay Lightning draft pick. He's 21 years old, and he's a solid two-way defenseman with some real offensive streaks that he's been adding to his game since graduating to college. And beyond that, guys like Aaron Manishin and Lucas Gustafson and Charlie Letty, Aiden Hreschuk, Drew Fortescue. They have a full lineup of 6 defensemen that are just solid and reliable and fit very specific roles, as I mentioned. But the best defensive player on this team is not a defenseman, right?
Yep. It's the goaltender. Jacob Fowler has been ridiculous. He just recently broke on March 31st the record for most wins by a freshman goaltender in NCAA history. He's up to 31
31.
wins. Ridiculous. And the game he played against Boston University in the Hockey East Finals was probably the best It was the best showcase of goaltending I've seen all year. The best single game goalie performance I've seen all year. The puck tracking, the intelligence, the awareness, the desperation saves he made, the timing of those saves as well. I mean, he kept Boston College in this game the whole time and kept them ahead the whole game. And yeah, just a ridiculous goaltender that they have, and he's still. I mean, he just turned 19, so we're looking at a goalie who's only going to get better from now, and has all the makings of an NHL starter, which Michigan I wouldn't say have, and I think that's going to be the difference maker. Is a
Yeah.
goaltending situation, and that might just carry BC to a Frozen Four finals. But we'll get into the brackets themselves, who we think is going to be facing off in the finals, and who we think is going to win the NCAA Frozen Four tournament. And we'll also choose 3 stars each. We'll get into all of that and more in just a second after these messages from our sponsors at Sleeper.
We are wrapping up the NHL season now with the trade deadline in the rear view and the playoffs just on the horizon. But you can still get in on the action with Sleeper. Sleeper is our number one choice here at the Locked On NHL Podcast Network for all of your daily fantasy hockey needs. That's because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your money in daily fantasy hockey contests. And all you need to do that is to correctly predict the outcome of 8 specific player stats. And you can get really creative with that if you so desire. Whether you want to bet on the stars of the league, whether it be Nathan McKinnon, Nikita Kucherov, Connor McDavid, all some pretty good players that are putting up a bunch of points this year. Or maybe you want to stick more along the lines of this podcast and take some harder swings on some of the young guns in the league. Whether it be Connor Bedard or Yuri Slafkovsky, the choice is yours with Sleeper. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details on locational availability.
Alrighty, so moving on to our final segment, who is going to win the Frozen Four? We'll be talking about the teams that are going to be facing off in the finals, in our opinions. Which of the two is going to win? Who's going to be the standouts for each team? We're going to choose 3 stars each to kind of break down for you here, and kind of choose our best players of the tournament. And yeah, let's get right into it. Who is going to win between BU and Denver, in your opinion?
I think with the bracket, at least, we're not going to have too many disagreements. I think that it's going to be. I think that it's going to be a tight matchup because Denver's been playing some excellent hockey this season. And that said, it's going to be BU in my opinion. They are an older team. They have a more quantity in terms of high-end impact players. Even if you're looking at like the star matchups in this game, like Zeev Buium versus Lane Hutson. Lane Hutson plays a very similar style to Zeev Buium, but is a couple of years older and is probably going to be playing some NHL hockey at the tail end of this season. And I think that that's going to be a bit of a difference maker for Boston University here.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the main kind of difference here is um, BU has more difference makers. You know, they have Macklin Celebrini, they have Lane Hutson. Those two are absurd together. As much as I
Yeah.
like Jack Devine, as much as I like Zeev Buium, I don't see either of them as at least on the level of Celebrini and Hutson in terms of difference making ability. I think that with Jack Devine, I mean, there's a big gap between 1 and 2 in terms of forwards, but for me with Celebrini, he's better than Jack Devine. He's the best player in the NCAA. You can't count him out in any game. So I think for sure. BU is going to kind of come out of this with a win, unless Denver's goalie stands on his head. I think that's a possibility. But it's just because I don't see Karan, the Boston University's goalie, as necessarily a difference maker in any way. We were kind of talking before the episode, and I think his goals saved above expected is probably at 0. He doesn't let in bad goals, but he doesn't save goals either. He's kind of just a guy, I guess, in a way. Which
Yeah.
we'll see how that works out. But for me, really, the difference maker is Macklin Celebrini, Lane Hutson being better than anyone on Denver's roster. And I think that's going to be kind of the separating factor there. But moving on to Michigan versus BC. This one I think is a bit less tight than the BU versus Denver matchup, right?
Yes, I think like Boston College is like the definition of a wagon. I think any team beating them in this Frozen Four tournament would be making an upset. Like they
Yeah.
are certainly the favorites going into this. That said, I would never count out the University of Michigan, and they have some excellent, excellent hockey players. I mean, as we
Yeah.
mentioned in our rundown, ranging from Frank Nazar to Gavin Brindley to Rutger McGroarty, there's a ton of depth as well and just high end talent here. And while it doesn't compare to Boston College, I
Yeah.
don't think an upset is impossible here either. But that said, Boston College, I think, is going to win this game, and I think we're going to have a full Boston final in the Frozen Four and a rematch of that Hockey East Championship game. And if we're looking at that type of a final, who do you think is going to come out on top between those two Boston programs?
It's a tough one because Boston College has just been ragdolling every opponent they face this year, including BU when they
Including
faced them.
Boston
Yeah,
University.
including when these two teams faced off in the Hockey East finals, Boston College made a meal out of them. So it's going to be difficult for me. I think BU is going to be coming out with a lot of energy. They're going to be learning a lot from that game, whereas BC might be kind of, especially with a team that's so young, with so many like young stars on that team. Might be coming out with a bit less foot on the gas, and that you know if BU catches them by surprise at the start of the game, I think there is a possibility that Boston University pulls off the upset. But I can't bet against Jacob Fowler. Jacob Fowler has been the difference maker so far. As good as the forwards have been, as good as the defensemen have been, Jacob Fowler for me is the big difference maker between the two. Boston University does not have that level of goaltending. That was very, very clear in the game that they faced off against each other in the Hockey's finals. So I would say Boston College wins this game, but I could see a realistic possibility where BU comes out of the gate early with a lot of energy, a lot of pace, and catches Boston College's young players by surprise with a couple of early goals, and then just snags onto that lead and holds onto it for dear life. But we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think as you mentioned, I mean, like four of Boston College's five best players, apart from Cutter Gauthier, are freshmen, right? Like
Yeah,
you're looking at the entire kid line of Will Smith, Ryan Leonard, Gabe Perreault, as well as the star goaltender in Jacob
yeah,
Fowler, who we have to note is always playing his best hockey when the most is on the line. Going back
yeah.
to his draft year last year with a massive
Youngstown.
run
Yeah,
with Youngstown, where he dragged them to a championship, and this season so far, he's also kept his best performances for the biggest games. We saw that in that Hockey East final. He was the best player on the ice the entire game, and it was the difference making factor, right? But
yeah.
I am with you though. Like I do think that Boston College is going to win this game, youth and all. This is a tremendous program, and that said, I would love to see an upset. I love like having these brackets just torn to shreds as quickly as
Yeah.
possible, and my expectations defied. It makes more fun. It makes for a more fun viewing experience, and goes to show just the fun in hockey itself because it is so unpredictable. But
Yeah.
this Boston College team is tremendous.
Yeah, if Michigan beats BC, I'm going to take that personally. Moving on to our three stars. We'll go quick on this. My three stars for this tournament are going to be Macklin Celebrini, Ryan Leonard, and Cutter Gauthier. I'm going with three forwards, keeping it simple. Celebrini, again, just such a clutch player, always keeping his best performances for last. Always steps up in big moments and scores big goals. He scored a goal to cut the lead against BC last in the Hockey East finals. So I think he's able to kind of put pucks past Jacob Fowler, which isn't easy. Ryan Leonard, great energy. Cutter Gauthier, great off puck movement and goal scoring. I think all three of them are going to have great performances at this tournament. But you have three completely different three stars than I do, right?
I do. I wanted some variety in here because there's a ton of options. I will start with my honorable mention in Gabe Perreault because I think him not featuring in either of our projected three stars
It's
would
a
be a little bit
travesty.
unfortunate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
but we kept our stars all confined to just the Boston teams because we are expecting that to be the finals matchup. But again,
Yeah.
if that's torn to shreds very quickly, I'm all for it. That said, my three stars are going to be Will Smith, who has just been ramping up the performances the longer that this playoff run is going for Boston College. And that Hockey East final scored 4 goals, the rooster trick.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's pretty good at the whole hockey thing. Apart from
Mhm.
that, I went with Lane Hutson. I think that like he's going to keep some of his best college performances for last. He's going in all likelihood to graduate to the NHL once Boston University finishes this run, whether it be on top or with an elimination. And I think he's going to try to drag his team to a championship at the Frozen Four. And last but not least, we've been talking about him all episode, but I'm going with Jacob Fowler. So I'm sure Habs fans are going to like that I picked 2 of their players. I don't think it's necessarily a given that either of them is going to end up in the 3 stars, because there are just so many high-end players that are going to feature in this tournament. But Jacob Fowler has just stolen games for Boston College, and to steal games for even without him, which would be the best program in college hockey this season, it takes a pretty special goaltender to do that. So yeah, Jacob Fowler is the final name in my 3 stars.
Absolutely. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports on a 24/7 news channel over on YouTube. And make sure to tune in for our next show as we continue our prospects coverage for the month of April. This has been Hattie Kalakash with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.